Hello everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today we'll be talking about Shang-Chi, because of course this is the biggest news item when it comes to the box office, and whether or not the film's going to actually make any net gains, net profit, since everyone, of course, is still obsessing over the very impressive opening weekend for this film, especially during COVID time, especially during the typically lackluster Labor Day weekend, which of course I've already broken down in another video about why the entire Labor Day record thing really is kind of fool's gold in a lot of ways when you look at films that have actually been released on Labor Day and how any Marvel film coming out on Labor Day weekend doesn't really have much competition there. But the biggest question, of course, that I care about and that anyone that follows box office stuff specifically cares about is, is this movie or any movies in general going to make any actual net gains, net profit? So we'll talk about that today. Before going any further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, light up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey. Make sure you subscribe to the channel with that bell notification on. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. And also, please make sure that you like this video, because there is, and this has been something that's covered on Geeks and Gamers and other places, apparently there's this campaign going on through Reddit, of all places, to essentially go after any channel that's being even somewhat critical of it. And here's the thing, I'm not even being critical of Shang-Chi. I'm just calling out the box office numbers. I'm just saying what the numbers are, doing a little bit of maths, and just trying to point out to certain facts and certain historical realities. So it's amazing that people are getting so hurt by this. It's almost like they're treating this as if it's their child or something, that anyone is going to say even something somewhat remotely negative about it, even though I haven't actually seen the film to say one way or the other whether the film is good or bad. And I've even said I've heard good things about the film from friends of mine, I've heard bad things about it, and I've heard mixed things, which is pretty much typical for most big budget movies. What I care about, and what a lot of people in my audience who follow me care about, are the actual numbers. What is the data actually saying? What are the actual facts saying? And the fact is, this film needs to make $375 million worldwide by the end of its run in order for it to make any net gains, any net profit. So whenever people try and say, "Ooh, you can't say it's a flop, you can't say it's a flop," well, no one can really say it's a flop or not until we actually have the final number. Now, typically, after the first 2 weeks, we can start to make some predictions because we can actually see what the drop-offs are like. You can't really use the first weekend's day-to-day drop-offs for any real indication because, again, it is a holiday weekend and it's a brand new film, and obviously it's getting a lot of buzz, and so this weekend's going to see a lot of very strong performances, and there is no doubt that this film is performing strongly in comparison to other pandemic films and also, of course, to other Labor Day films. But really, the Labor Day number, as I said, is kind of something that shouldn't even be talked about when you, again, know the history of Labor Day. If we're going to talk about pandemic times, I would say that that's probably the best place for you to go with any type of argumentation of the film doing really well box office-wise, because that is indeed true. It is one of the best performing films during box office times. It is up there with films like Black Widow, which, unless you count the Disney Plus numbers, lost money. Fast and Furious 9, which, if you remember, most of that money came from China, and studios only get about 25% of that money from China. There's even a question about whether that film was profitable or just how profitable that film was. So as you can see, it starts to get complicated when you actually start to break the numbers down. This is not just me trying to throw shade at Shang-Chi. This is not just me trying to throw shade at a specific audience. This is me trying to, again, say, here's what the numbers are, here's what the numbers say, and here's what the reality of the situation is. And so as we can see here from Deadline, and of course, everyone's going to be running with this, Shang-Chi to the moon! Little bit of stonk talk there. Marvel Asian American superhero movie. They got to put it in there, right? Because that's what it's all about. They're still going to try and pander to that, saying, hey, by the way, if you're Asian, don't forget, don't miss out on this. And to be honest, I think that what you're going to find here from studios like Marvel is they're going to look at this and they're going to say, oh man, this was so successful during pandemic times. Whether it's profitable or not, we're going to get to that in a second. But all this is going to do is say, hey, if we pander to certain racial or gender demographics, that's what's going to help us make money. Which means that they're going to be more willing to sacrifice things like storytelling in order to try and placate to and pander to certain audiences. That's one reason why I think there's reason to be concerned about any type of success when there are films like this. Again, I have not seen the film itself. I don't know if the film is any good. There are several people who've said it is. There's others that said it's okay. And there's others that said it sucked. All I can say is that the story around this film, especially in the media, has been focused solely not on the story, not on anything else other than the fact that has something to do with Asian audiences. So I think that is something that is worth pointing out there. All right, this is the Monday update. It says, as we told you yesterday, Disney's Shang-Chi is easily headed to a $90+ million 4-day opening weekend. This comes after an awesome Sunday hold of -2% from Saturday, with 22.7, bringing the picks total 3-day to 75.5 million, which also I broke down on Twitter. If you actually adjust for inflation, that makes this film the third lowest opening for any Marvel film domestically. And again, we can argue about how, yeah, those other films came out, though not during pandemic times, and so therefore it's still impressive. At the end of the day, it is still one of the lowest grossing as far as the opening domestic weekend goes. Again, whether you like it or not, whether you want to give an excuse to it or not, that is a fact. That it is the third lowest opening, or one of the, again, 3 or 4 lowest opening films domestically in history. The only other films that did worse than this one when you adjust for inflation would have been the first Ant-Man and also The Incredible Hulk. All of the other films, when you adjust for inflation, are higher than this movie. And again, doesn't make the film a guaranteed flop at this point, but it is, I think, something that's worth noting, talking about why, again, the buzz around this film, if you're going to just focus on pandemic time, sure, you might have an argument there, but in general, this is not what we've seen throughout all movies coming out during the pandemic times. So this is not an indication that the box office is back by any means. Even experts themselves have said consistently, box office will not be back to 2019 numbers until 2 to 3 years from now. Anyway, again, these are just facts that I'm trying to spit out for you guys. It goes on. Industry estimates see it between $91 and $92 million for the 4-day. Today's expected to come in around $16.2 million, while Disney is figuring $14.5. Either way you slice it, it's a hit. Okay. Depends on how you define hit. If you mean during pandemic times, okay, sure, absolutely. Those numbers hold. Here's the thing that I'm going to be looking for, though. You have these massive openings for Labor Day weekend. What's going to happen during week 2? Yes, you're not having a lot of competition during week 2, but are people going to be able to continue to show up and consistently show up to support this movie or not? And that is going to be the biggest indicator. If next week we see a low drop-off, which again, theoretically is possible, if we see a low drop-off, what that means is that this film is likely going to make a lot of money in comparison to other films that come out this year and has a very good chance of being able to reach the point of profitability net gain, or at the very least breaking even. But we're not going to be able to really know that until next week when we see that week 1 and week 2 drop off, because if this movie is front loaded, and a lot of times Marvel films, big budget films, they tend to be incredibly front loaded. There's a lot of marketing that goes into it. There's a lot of campaigns that go into trying to get the highest number possible for that opening weekend. It's that second weekend that really tells you everything that you need to know as far as whether or not the film is going to be actually profitable. Again, not talking here about for pandemic times, I mean actual how much money they spent on the film and how much money they are getting back. And so speaking of that, let's go ahead and just look at those box office numbers for a second. So as I said, with Shang-Chi, again, that 127.6, that's for the 3-day opening. Obviously, when you add in the 4-day, it's going to be closer to $140 million there. But $150 million budget is what this film cost. And this is, again, something where it could be more, it could be less. These are all estimates. Based on that, when you add in marketing, that's $225 million that the total film cost. All right? That's the total cost of the movie. Hopefully everyone's with me. Right now, the movie would be at around, I think I was able to update this to include the 4-day estimate number here. So that means right now the film has around $146.2 million. It's sitting still at a negative $137.2 million loss. Now, again, it's the opening weekend, so there's still a lot of time for that number to change. Here's the thing that people don't quite understand. When you use terms like flop, what that means is that the movie did not and will not make money. That's what the term flop means. It doesn't mean that, oh, it didn't do well for pandemic times. People need to get their language kind of fixed there. What that means, if everyone's saying flop or likely going to be a flop or is going to lose money, it's because we're basing it off of factual data. Now, we can't really predict yet because, as I've always been very clear on, in fact, in my own modeling itself, look, I do everything from the first 2 weeks, the week 1 to week 2 drop off. That's where my projections come from. Can't do that yet for this movie. We'll have to wait and see just how front loaded the film is, or if it is going to consistently make more money next weekend, which is very possible. But it might not be. We'll have to wait and see on that. But because of the fact, and here's the important thing, this number here, the 146, this is not $146.2 million that's going straight into Disney's pocket. Remember, they only get about 60% of this reported number, and by the end of its run. And the reason why is because they are splitting these revenues with movie theaters. They're splitting these revenues sometimes with different countries. They have different deals in which how much money they get from each ticket price. Normally during the opening weeks, they get a good 90% of the ticket price. That's why you have theaters that charge so much for popcorn and things like that. But when it comes down to by the end of the run, and that's why I base everything on what the number is going to be by the end of its run, because typically it's around 60% that the studio actually gets from that final number, we're able to make some projections and able to make some predictions based on that number. So understanding, right, that if this, assuming this is the final number, this would be what the financial loss would be. Now, we know that this is not going to be the final number. We know that it's probably going to be closer to $300 million probably at this point by the end of its run. But knowing that, one, it only gets 60% of this number, Disney, the studio, and two, it cost $225 million total, you then have to take those things into account to understand whether a film is going to have a net gain or net loss, meaning how much it spent versus how much the studio actually got, how much the movie actually gets. So, breaking this down, that means that this movie, based on those numbers, needs to make $375 million in order for itself to break even. How do I know that? Because $225 million, the total cost of the film, is 60% of $375 million. So that means that if the film gets to $375 million in this category right here, boom, it's made its money back, and anything after that is net gain, net profit. The biggest question mark of this film is whether or not it's going to actually reach that number. And again, if the number is strong next weekend, if we see a minimal drop-off next weekend, if this film continues to perform well, if they're able to finally work out a deal with China, right? Obviously, that's going to balloon that number up a bit too. Then you're looking at a film that's actually going to be one of the first films by Disney this year, in the last year and a half actually, to make any money. And obviously, that's going to be a big success for Shang-Chi and a big success for Disney to finally be able to crack the pandemic code. As I said, one of the downsides to that, though, is that Disney is not going to look at that and say, oh, if we just make some fun movie with a lot of fighting sequences in it and using some practical effects and things like that for some of the film, maybe that's what people want. No, what they're going to say is, oh, if we pander to certain racial demographics, that's how we're going to make money. And that is something I think to be concerned about, because Disney's already been showing it's going to try and move in that direction. And if we just continue to get movie after movie, not focusing on story as much, and I'm not saying that this is true with Shang-Chi, by the way, I'm saying for the future films, again, when they see success, they try and break it down to its most basic level. They don't try and dive a whole lot deep into the discussion here. You know, we've seen this happen with Hollywood before and studios before when they've put sequel after sequel after sequel thinking, oh, this is what people want. And after a while, when you put out the same thing over and over and over again and you fail to recognize what captured the audience's hearts in the first film of a franchise, you start to realize that studios have really no idea, in many cases, what fans want. So when they look to this, as I said, if this film is able to actually make profit, which right now, guess what? It's not profitable. Someone at one point said, in 5 days it's going to make its money back. No. Again, that $225 million of actual cost, again, they only get 60% of this. This is their actual loss right now. So either it's going to end up in a loss, it's going to break even, or it's going to make profit. Those are the three options available for any given movie. If you want to see how films have done this year, check out my charting, OMBReviews.com. Again, I've got all the numbers here. I got all the breakdowns here. I got how accurate my projections were. And obviously, it's a lot more haphazard with COVID times than in previous times. But even then, it's still pretty consistent between the 40 and 70% mark. Rather, between the 50 and 70% mark, which is the numbers that I typically have for my range. And you'll see, right, that right now, the average 63% is actually, again, very much falling close in line with what I typically project. But when we talk about profitability, we have to be very clear about what, one, a flop is, which means, hey, net loss. As of right now, again, as of right now, if Shang-Chi left theaters today and made no more money, it would be a flop. That's not an opinion. That's just factual number data facts. Now, will it make money or not? We have to wait and see. We have to wait and see. Anyway, what are your thoughts about it? Do you think that Shang-Chi is going to reach the $375 million it needs to break even? Let me know in the comments section below. Also, a little bit of a side note here today. Again, as many of you know, I am a practicing and devout Catholic. We are starting today, shout out to the channel Return to Tradition, a 7 Sorrows Rosary Novena for the next 9 days praying the 7 Sorrows Rosary. So if you want to go ahead and find out more information about that, check out Return to Tradition. Great YouTube channel, especially for Catholic commentary. And we're going to be starting that today. And we're going to be praying, of course, for the conversion of the Holy Father, praying for the conversion of our bishops, and for the protection of the church. But just wanted to get that in there as a little bit of an aside, because it is important, as you know. My faith life is incredibly important to me. But what are your thoughts about this? Do you think that Shang-Chi is going to make any money? Please let me know in the comment section below. If you like this video, smash that like button, line up that fire button. It really does mean a lot. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my September Locals Patreon and Subscribe Star members. First with my Locals members, Cats App, D Sharp, It's a Modern Major General Story, Laura Bifford de Hobbit, and Robert Barnes. I want to give a shout out to, especially to Laura, who is now a double supporter on Locals and on Patreon. So thank you for that. And to all of my Locals members. A shout out also to my Patreon members, Andrew Hoyle, animation commentator Brandon, Brian P., Christopher Bowman, Don Bruno de la Mancha, Father Christopher Miller, Hail to you, Father, Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Hannibal Grimm, Harold Francis, Inflamed Wood, Jacob Juice, Jeffrey Toon, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Gomer Kyle 79, the Modern Major General Story once again, Mike Jackson, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mondo Spieler, Mr. Peabody, On to June, Orange Hat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Rosetta Ullen, Teresa Martin, Theodore Bendon, Tina Bojan, and Tina B., the Empress of the Universe. And a shout out also to my Subscribe Star members, The R, Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, John B., Perpetual Punster, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss / the new number 2, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK Man. Thank you all very much for supporting the channel. It really does mean a lot. And if you want to have your name shouted out at the end of every single video or live stream on the main channel, please check out the links in the description below, specifically that top link, which will bring you to all of the links to my various social media pages and also places of support as well. And remember that if you join at the Army of Asgard level, you also get access to giveaways of 4K titles. Right now, I have a live giveaway of Snatch on 4K Steelbook. I've also got ones for Dread, Wrath of Man Blu-ray. I've also got A Quiet Place Part 2 on 4K. I've got Top Gun on 4K, Sicario on 4K, tons of films and more to come, especially as more films are getting released for those giveaways. At the Keeper of the Bifrost level, you get all of that, plus you get access to an exclusive podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger. Not only do you get to listen to the podcast, you also get to ask questions that we answer as much as we can and as fully as we can in a much more, I guess you could say, uncensored way, but again, a much more free-flowing way for our members over there at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above. And if you join the Chosen of Valhalla level, you get access to all of those things. Plus, in your first month, you get a free t-shirt, your choice, and I send it to you no matter where you are in the world. And also, you get to once a month be featured on the channel in the Chosen of Valhalla live stream, where we talk about movie, news, and pretty much anything that you want to talk about. So if that all sounds like fun to you, check out those links below. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.